This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
I was trying to get it out here. I want them dead presidents. I want to pull up, head spin, get fly. I got 6 jobs. I don't get tired. I don't get tired. I don't get tired. I don't get tired. Get fly. I got 6 jobs. I don't get tired.
And we are still not tired on this week's episode of Two Bad Hombres. I am your host, Vito Geronimo Churco, alongside my usual sidekick and broadcast partner in fun. That is Doc from Doc and Jack, John Charles Macaroon, on this post-Thanksgiving edition of Two Bad Hombres. Doc, how are you doing?
Vito, welcome to the weekend. Always enjoy reconnecting with you. Talking baseball earlier this week on Tigers Talk. Now, this episode of Two Bad Hombres. Oh, man, I had a good time over Thanksgiving. Taking a vacation was so well-deserved. Working all year, doing everything, all the projects, all the podcasts, the practice, all the other things that I'm involved in. Just taking a couple of days off and just kind of laying around, watching sports, tweeting, having a good old time, watching movies, and catching up on some things on the DVR was well worth it. I had a great Thanksgiving, and it did bring a renewed passion to broadcast, and I just love it. And especially, Vito, we had some of the most engaged followers when Michigan lost to Ohio State. It was awesome. Did
you have something to do with that maybe in getting the podcast network following riled up a bit at least? It seemed like you did on Twitter last weekend.
I took it to a great level of trolling. I had a good time with it. We'll talk about that. Thanksgiving was awesome. We had a chance to spend time with my sister's side of the family and then hanging out taking the kids after. You know, it is a little tough when you're the family that has to kind of go to 2-3 houses, but the one thing I'll say is this. It's fun to connect with family that comes in from out of town. It's fun to have laughs. It's fun to see everybody that you don't get a chance to see quite a bit. And then, like I said, desserts are just always great. I went to my mother-in-law's house for the nightcap, had some great desserts, and called it a day. So Thanksgiving week was great for me. I loved it. And all week long, I was, like everybody else, anticipating the Ohio State game versus Michigan. And when it came, I went to the bar, had a great time watching it. I kind of had a feeling, like I said, that Ohio State was going to make it closer than what people thought. I didn't think they were going to actually win the game, but the way that game shook out allowed me, a Spartan supporter, to really hammer down on some fans and really put Michigan back in their place. And I think the fans now also realize what's happened here, and we'll talk about it a little bit in terms of the ramifications of a devastating loss that Michigan suffered to Ohio State. But it was great all the way around. My Thanksgiving was awesome. I'm super thankful. I started the day off on our Twitter page at Detroit Podcast, literally thanking everybody for the success that we've had, all the sponsors, all the supporters that contribute, you, all the hosts, everybody that's messaged us. So I think that's why we've had a lot of success, is that we're appreciative, we give back, and we're a good follow. So how was your Thanksgiving?
Well, you know what? It was very good despite the Lions losing, which I didn't really care about too much, honestly.
Yeah, it didn't hit my radar, right.
I wasn't too invested in the Lions winning that ball game, playing in that ball game. I did watch, actually, more than half of it. But, man, Lions just don't look good this year, do they? Matt Stafford didn't have the best performance. Then you lose to Chase Daniel, a backup that hasn't played in how many years, up until the point of that Bears-Lions game, and you let him beat you, too? And Stafford wasn't great, wasn't good enough at home? I mean, Thanksgiving Day, man, show a little bit more and get the job done against the, offensively hapless Bears led by Chase Daniel, really a career backup, a guy that hadn't started in so many years now. He comes into your house and beats you on Thanksgiving Day. You allow that to happen? That was ugly. It was pitiful. It was inexcusable. You used the adjective that you wanted to describe it, because to me, it was just downright and utterly despicable and horrible to witness that for all of the game that I did actually watch on Thanksgiving Day.
The national media was not too kind to Detroit in terms of sports this last week.
No.
Pouncing on Matt Stafford, and then Saturday now pouncing all week this week on Jim Harbaugh and what's going on with the Wolverines. So it wasn't a good week in terms of PR for both of those guys.
No, their brands were diminished big time, weren't they, with their most recent games?
But did you eat healthily? Did you eat good? Who cooked, and how did everything go for you?
Ate a lot at my Uncle Rick's house, so my dad's side, his brother's house, and it's like a family tradition down the Churco side to gather with the Churcos on my dad's side and to spend Thanksgiving with them over, once again, my uncle's house, my dad's brother, and ate a lot of food, obviously, right? Too much food. We had, the great turkey, which is a little bit overrated to me, but I do like turkey with the gravy. The gravy on the mashed potatoes, the gravy on the stuffing. The best stuffing that I ever have had is on Thanksgiving. And rightfully so, right? It is Thanksgiving dinner. You should have some great stuffing. And it's with meat as well thrown into there, some celery. It's terrific, man. It's utterly delicious. I mean, it's beyond delicious, this stuffing. It's like almost my favorite dish during Thanksgiving dinner. And, yeah, like I said before, turkey's kind of overrated. But if you get the dark turkey, that's what I like a little bit more, which is more fattening, I know, and not the best, the most healthy for you. But I pour the gravy, man, on there. I just pour the gravy all over everything. I'll eat anything with gravy. Literally, anything with gravy. And trust me, I used up as much gravy as I could for Thanksgiving dinner. So I had a delicious dinner, delicious pumpkin pie, and desserts. I didn't indulge too much into the desserts. Probably too much there to consume for all of us there on the Churco side. But man, it was tremendous food, tremendous times, showing gratitude. We even filled out these cards showing gratitude for whatever it was that we were grateful for. So that was great to do that and to show our thanks and kind of maybe starting a little family tradition on the Churco side there with that. And why not give thanks? That's the point of the holiday, right? Is to give thanks, to show our gratitude to all those that mean so much to us, that impact our lives so deeply on a positive level. And that's the way of doing things, man. You live it up with your family, have some fun, and relax. And I did so on Thanksgiving Day.
So, Vito, I got to ask you, whose stock do you think took a worse dive? Matt Stafford's or Jim Harbaugh's? Because both obviously had big things to try and accomplish, and Matthew Stafford, through the interception, basically cost the Detroit Lions the victory. Everybody's talking now about his entire tenure, 10 years here in the league. Hasn't had a lot of success. Another season where the Lions are not going to make the postseason. Most likely going to be embarrassed tomorrow at home in front of their home fans playing the LA Rams.
Yeah, good luck against the Rams.
They might win it. You never know. But, there's been games where the Lions have showed out, but now Marvin Jones on the IR, Kerryon Johnson most likely not going to be part of that game versus the Rams. And then you look over and you see Jim Harbaugh 0-4 versus your biggest rival with everything on the line. Your next opponent would have been in Indy, Northwestern, for the chance to get into the playoff. And for that performance to go down like that, it wasn't just that you lost. It wasn't just that the Wolverines didn't walk away from Columbus with the victory. It was the manner in which that game shook down, where every facet of the game went in Ohio State's favor.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And I kind of said it in a trolling manner, but, in podcasts past, I've said that, Michigan's biggest weakness has been Jim Harbaugh. In this game, clearly, and we can start with that because I think most people started critiquing Matthew Stafford maybe 3 years ago.
Prematurely, I think. Right to do so this year. You started doing it prematurely and picking apart his game.
Well, I had contact with beat writers, the likes of Josh Kastenstein, who 3 years ago said, this guy doesn't have it. And so I started to be critical, and I started to go back and forth like everybody else. But yeah, last year I was like 9-7, a game versus Cincinnati on the road when you absolutely have to have it. And you just go, at some point, you have to come to the realization that you got to step your ass up. You have to at some point, and it's been 10 years now. Next year will be 11, most likely with a new OC, and people are still making excuses for Stafford. So that's just his luck, and some people have said it. El Presidente, the president and CEO of Barstool, has said, look, it's a miracle that this guy pretty much has gotten away with being known as a decent quarterback when most people are now starting to think that maybe he's really an awful quarterback. So the tide's turning, and with each bad interception, more people will get on that bandwagon. I think a lot of fans have given up on Matthew Stafford. But we'll start with Jim Harbaugh, and we'll start with Michigan, because the manner in which the Wolverines got their ass kicked really kind of lends to some questioning and some critical look at the scheme, the game plan, the manner in which that game was approached, the guarantee from Karan Higdon.
Sorry, Karan, you look bad now.
I don't think so.
He kind of looks foolish now. Well, you allow 62 points, like you said, the manner in which Michigan lost. Got demolished, got manhandled. Not just on Karan. I'm not saying it's just on him, but anyways.
Yeah, it's a situation in which that all played a part in it. I think Ohio State, and the way to contextualize it is Ohio State wanted it more. They were on the ball. They were flying all over the place. They executed at a supremely high level. Michigan didn't look anywhere near ready to compete at the level that you would need to beat Ohio State. And I would argue a different coach, a la Dabo Swinney, a la Nick Saban, could have had this talent and taken it maybe and had an undefeated season with this talent. And I think coaching is a significant thing to look at in that. That first game versus Notre Dame, again, you looked unprepared. You looked like a team that wasn't ready to be on the field in a big-time moment. Now, you rebound great, and you go through the regular season, and you win 10 straight games. But then the game in which everybody's going to be watching, everybody is going to be excited, especially when it was kind of framed as a program-defining game. You didn't just lose, Vito. The Wolverines got their ass kicked. And that in that manner, a lot of people are going, whoa, what's going on with Michigan? Because they've seen that before. Obviously, in situations past where it was in Ann Arbor, a game in which you watch in a monsoon versus Michigan State, where you have quarterbacks that are subpar throwing the ball, whereas Michigan State pounded the rock, and effectively shocked everybody by going to Ann Arbor and winning the game in 2017. And you look at it and you go, Jim Harbaugh has never, ever, as a head coach of a college team, won the division. Ever. Not at Stanford, not at San Diego State, and now at Michigan after 4 years, especially with the way the season shook out. You guys were lucky and poised to have an opportunity to get to Indy and the college football playoff, a spot that the Spartans have been in, a spot that, we were lucky to obviously have a contest versus Alabama, and we got our asses kicked nationally. But for Michigan in year 4, with their supposed quarterback in Shea Patterson, a whole year, basically you would think to be practicing and at least having Ohio State on your mind, you didn't come. You didn't come to play, and you definitely didn't deliver the goods. And a lot of people are pissed because it's not the realization that Michigan's over. It's this realization that there really are only 2 guys that can have year in and year out success, and one guy that's just perennially putting his team in the playoff, and that's Alabama. I think when Michigan fans got that guy, they got Jim Harbaugh, they felt like, okay, we got our Nick Saban. We got a guy that can bring us to the promised land year after year after year. Back up. It ain't the case. I would say one tops national title maybe is coming to the Wolverines, and it's a distant hope now because as long as Urban Meyer's at Ohio State, you guys are secondary, and the Wolverines are not in the position to be atop the Big Ten as long as Urban Meyer's there. And I think that that understanding and that realization finally hit home because Ohio State dropped 62 points on your ass. And that realization, I think, was so sweet for a guy like me because, we sit and watch all the media hype, everybody talking about how great Michigan is week in and week out, the leaders and best, the revenge tour, all the shirts being sold, and you guys haven't done anything. And so now when you guys lose a game like that, it's just great for us to sit back and go,
you're saying you guys.
Oh, me.
You're calling me, those guys? Michigan?
Oh, tell me
part of Michigan faithful? You're saying that you're accusing me of being a Michigan fan?
Okay,
Look at you, John. Wow.
Vito, I'm going to ask you this. Tell me throughout the 10-game winning streak, you didn't look at that jacket and go, damn, the M is back, baby.
Well, I felt good going into the Michigan-Ohio State game. I did, and I felt bad for Michigan losing that game. Because you know what? You know why I was despondent? So I got to admit, I was despondent because of the fact that I thought Michigan really had a legit shot at winning. I didn't care that it was happening in the horseshoe, but your team was supposedly better than Ohio State. The number 4 team in the nation, Ohio State at number 10. It was a down season for Ohio State, supposedly. A down year for Ohio State. You win 10 going into that Michigan game, though, and then you beat up Michigan. You manhandle Michigan. You score 62 points on U of M, the most points U of M has ever allowed against Ohio State. More points than Michigan has allowed in basketball this season in a single game. Did you know that fact? How about that factoid? Michigan in basketball, at least as of a couple of days ago, had not allowed as many points as Michigan allowed to Ohio State in football last Saturday. And I don't care that it happened in the horseshoe. Your athletes were as good as Ohio State's athletes, at least. But guess what? The difference maker was Urban Meyer being elite, making that Ohio State program great. And because Jim Harbaugh isn't elite, he's only good as a head coach, which makes Michigan's program only good. Michigan's program is not great yet. It's not on the same level as Ohio State's football program, which, like I said, is elite. Michigan's program is a step or two below and is only good. Because Michigan had a good season. You can't take that away from Michigan. But who did Michigan beat on its schedule now? Look at it like that with a big lens. And the big picture is Michigan didn't beat anybody of high relevance. Did it? It didn't happen for Michigan this year. You lost game number 1, week number 1, in the second biggest game of the season behind the Ohio State game, and you weren't prepared. You didn't come out ready in the first half of that game against Notre Dame. And I don't care that it was the first game and on the road. You should have come out more prepared. to start off that game, and you weren't prepared. And Shea Patterson didn't look good. The offense couldn't do anything, and the defense picked it up in the second half. But where was this great-looking quarterback against Ohio State, too? And where was this great vaunted D that was the number 1 D in the nation? Where was that D? Chase Winovich was a shell of himself. Obviously, he wasn't healthy going into that. But, man, he wasn't good enough. And I know you got to bring the health into the equation. But you still got to point the finger at him and other guys on the defensive side of the ball, in the secondary especially, and Brandon Watson, man. He got beat up. He got shredded. And that secondary got shredded all game long. And it, did specifically throughout the first half as well, right? And then going into halftime, you expected Michigan only down by 5. Remember, Michigan was only down by 5, 24-19. So Ohio State wasn't blowing out Michigan at that point. And then you failed to adjust as a defensive unit. Don Brown, what were you thinking, old man? He was a stubborn old man, not willing to adjust his ways defensively. And then you just kept allowing Ohio State to shred you over the middle with those slants through the air. Haskins looked like a legend. He is a legendary figure now in Columbus. And, in this rivalry game, because he just shredded Michigan for big yards all game long. Those slot receivers just ran up plenty with ease and got into the open field and were gone, and way too easily. You were this vaunted number 1 D in the nation, and you allowed that to happen. And again, second, third, fourth stringers, I think even third stringers from Ohio State, which just showcases Ohio State's extreme amount of depth. And it's a reason why Ohio State is elite behind/under the leadership of Urban Meyer, who is truly an elite headman. And there's not many of those guys out there. They don't grow on trees. I mean, it's Nick Saban, as you mentioned earlier, then Urban Meyer, then Dabo Swinney, I think. Harbaugh might be the best of the rest, but Jim Harbaugh is not a part of that elite coaching class yet.
Now let's get some national reaction. Rob Parker went on the Herd, Colin Cowherd's radio program, and here's his thoughts on maybe if Jim Harbaugh is getting preferential treatment over there in Ann Arbor.
I was saying this to a friend the other day. I said, Big Ben had a terrible pick. I still think he's a great quarterback. Jim Harbaugh loses to Ohio State. Okay, like everybody in the Big Ten is, I still think Jim Harbaugh's a great coach. You disagree?
I totally disagree. When you use the term great, he hasn't won anything. You know what? Jim Harbaugh, I still don't even get it. Coming off of that loss, I mean, what an embarrassing loss to your rival. He's now 0-4. Colin, it was so quiet in Ann Arbor after that game that you could hear a mouse urinate on a pair of wrinkled khakis. That's how bad it was. People couldn't believe how bad that they would lose. And then Jim Harbaugh, no Michigan coach has ever been 0-4 against Ohio State. And in that game, had that been Brady Hoke or Rich Rodriguez, they would run him out of town. There's no way. He's paid at a championship level, and he's never won a championship.
Okay, now I will say that. What he is paid is because of leverage, because he'd been to a Super Bowl.
I get it. So he didn't win in San Francisco.
He
didn't win in Stanford.
to a Super Bowl.
That's not what it's about. Sports has a short menu,
So you
Colin.
don't think Andy Reid's a good coach?
It's winning losses. Andy Reid, too. Wake me up when he wins a championship. You could do all you want at some point. That's why in Buffalo, right, no one ever mentions Marv Levy as a great coach, as the greatest coach in the NFL. He went to 4 straight Super Bowls. You know what he didn't do? He didn't win. Bobby Cox went to 16 straight. They won 16 straight National League East divisions. They won 1 championship with 3 Hall of Fame pitchers on the same staff for more than a decade. That's not good enough. Jim Harbaugh, I don't know why people, they like him, but why they give him a pass. At some point, you got to ante up.
At some point, you got to ante up and win the big game. I think that's the same thing that people are angry at Matthew Stafford at, is at some point, you got to win. And here's what people will say when I start throwing out on our Twitter page at Detroit Podcast. It's time for a new quarterback. It's time for a new head coach, maybe at Michigan. They go, okay, well, what's better? Well, tell me your solution. Well, I say, look, the reason why I'm not happy with Matthew Stafford is if we continue, we're going to see more of this in terms of interceptions in big games. You're not going to show up. With Jim Harbaugh, I understand he wins the games he's supposed to win, but he's paid to win the games against Ohio State and the likes of the big dogs. So what you're seeing is this. You're seeing that in big moments, Jim Harbaugh is subpar. And so if I don't see it changing significantly in that he's very stubborn, he might now be forced to change up that offense and maybe take a hands-off approach. But look, 10-2 is a great season, and that's fine.
Good. Not great now, right? Because of one game.
But what we're
the game that we're talking about.
But what we're trying to classify and evaluate is Jim Harbaugh is a good coach. He will get you 10 wins. But is that good enough? Year in and year out, if Michigan never wins a national title, never gets to Indy, never gets to the college football playoff, and he's 10-2 every year, eventually they're going to have to move on because the name of the game is not mediocrity. The name of the game is not, hey, getting 9 and 10 wins every year. The name of the game is we're paying you, Jim Harbaugh, as one of the higher paid coaches to win big games, to elevate that program to different levels. Look, Michigan can go out there and find a big-name coach to get 8 to 10 wins every year. But I think the investment was made in putting all the marbles in Jim Harbaugh to take it to the next level. All the marbles are made for Matthew Stafford to win the Super Bowl. And I said once he signed that contract, I want maybe 2 Super Bowls to pay him $27 million a year. People were like, oh, the contract's not a big deal. He's going to end up being the 6th or 7th paid. I'm like, look, he ain't worth $27 million. I'm all about value is what I screamed in podcasts in the last 6 months. I'm about value. Michigan's not getting $7.5 million worth out of Jim Harbaugh. They're not getting it. Mark D'Antonio's only making $4.4 million, and he's been to the playoff. So, and I'm a guy that looks at that.
How long can you keep saying that, too, about State? Not talking State, but when's the last, how many years ago was that? Now, what has State done since Harbaugh started at Michigan? I'm not saying that Michigan's definitely overtaken the rivalry between Michigan and Michigan State, and that Michigan State's a little brother now all of a sudden. I'm not trying to say that.
2-2. It's even. He evened it out at least.
Yeah.
That's good.
But I'm saying the record of Michigan State overall-wise, win-loss record-wise, since Harbaugh started, consider all that. The last 3 years at State have not been great seasons by State, right? 2017 was good. It was the recovery year. They won 10 games. They won the Holiday Bowl. But it wasn't the greatest season for Michigan State. And Harbaugh has elevated the Michigan program, though. You got to give him that much. To be a 10-win caliber team, Hoke wasn't delivering 10 wins. Rich Rod wasn't delivering 10 wins. And I think the alternative to Harbaugh is not going to be something that Michigan fans like. Because I don't think you're going to hire Nick Saban. Like, the alternative that you want is going to have to be somebody better than Harbaugh. And who's definitively better than Harbaugh out there? Well, Urban Meyer, Nick Saban, Dabo Swinney. You can't get those guys right now to come and coach Michigan, right? They're locked into their jobs. I mean, I guess maybe you could pay Dabo Swinney a ton of money. Maybe you get him here. But Michigan's not going to do that. So who's the alternative? So I don't like you just saying, just get rid of guys just because you want to get rid of them because they're not doing enough. Because I do consider the fact that Michigan's not doing enough with Harbaugh because you had to beat Ohio State this year, and you didn't get it done. Once again, I don't care that you had to go on the road. That's the game you had to get this year against an Ohio State team that wasn't a vintage Ohio State team under Urban Meyer. So you had to win that game. You didn't get it done. You allowed all those points, and then you didn't score as many as Maryland. Maryland almost beat Ohio State the week before Michigan played Ohio State. Purdue beat Ohio State this year, and that was at home for Purdue, but still, Purdue scored 49 on Ohio State, and Michigan scores 39, couldn't score the 51 that Maryland scored a week ago, or the 49 that Purdue scored in that upset victory for Purdue. So Michigan's offense wasn't great enough either. So not only did the vaunted defense of Michigan have a huge letdown and didn't show up and got shredded all game long, and because of also, big time, because of Don Brown not adjusting his ways, his old stubborn ways, also offensively, Michigan didn't show up enough. And Shea Patterson, I think, has become this guy from being a guy that people consider to be the next Johnny Manziel or the next Baker Mayfield. He is a poor man's version, at best, of Johnny Manziel or Baker Mayfield. Shea Patterson hasn't lived up to expectations either this season. I really don't think he's become the guy that many people expected him to become as Michigan starting QB. Because people expected him to be an NFL passer, to be a first-round NFL draft pick. He's barely, I don't think he's even an NFL passer, Doc. He didn't even become that with Michigan, with the so-called quarterback whisperer on hand and Jim Harbaugh as the Michigan head man. Shea Patterson didn't become that, didn't live up to the bill. So not only did Michigan defensively, get shown to be foolish and get shown up. Also offensively, Michigan wasn't good enough against OSU. Couldn't keep up with OSU. And I don't care that your bread and butter was the defense all season long. Still offensively, Shea Patterson could have been better. And really all throughout the season, he got the benefit of the doubt because the defense kept bailing him out and kept being so potent and strong that it didn't matter as much what Shea Patterson did. Won a must-win game against your biggest rival in the game. Not just a game, the game. A game that's called the game literally. Shea Patterson didn't do enough. And that offensive attack, just didn't look great. And, well, as great as, once again, Maryland looked the week before against OSU, as Purdue looked when Purdue pulled off that upset victory. So no excuses for Michigan, and there's a lot of people to blame. So it's not just Don Brown, but it's also Shea Patterson in that offense. And obviously, Jim Harbaugh takes the biggest blame. And he looks bad now, man. 0-4 against his biggest rival. And it tells you, it screams at you that Michigan is not yet on the level of Ohio State. And many people expected by year number 4 for Michigan to be on that same level and to have beaten Ohio State at least once by now. And you still can't say that about Urban Meyer. And the best case scenario now, or about Jim Harbaugh, and the best case scenario now for Jim Harbaugh and Michigan is getting to a Rose Bowl. But that is all predicated upon Ohio State beating Northwestern in the Big Ten title game in Indianapolis tonight, which I expect Ohio State to do. But, man, best case scenario, Michigan gets to the Rose Bowl, and a year that Michigan should have reached its first college football playoff under Jim Harbaugh.
So where does Michigan go from here? What's going to happen now? The bowl game really is going to be meaningless. Nobody's going to care. Rashawn Gary's
even
go
as
pro.
A Rose Bowl. Rashawn Gary's going pro, like you said. And even though it's the Rose Bowl, people won't care as much because you laid an egg against Ohio State in a year, once again, where you should have beaten Ohio State, even on the road. And you should have made a Final Four. This was a year for Michigan to break the mold, to get into the Final Four for the first time under Jim Harbaugh, first time in school history. And you didn't do it, so the Rose Bowl is diminished in value subsequently, even if you get to that bowl game. And worst case scenario, you might get to like the Peach Bowl or a bowl like that on New Year's Day. It's a New Year's Six bowl. But who would even care about that game and about the outcome of that game when it gets to that point? Because Michigan once again laid the egg in its biggest game of the season. And really against all the really good teams this year, Doc, Michigan didn't show up and laid eggs. You know, at least in the first half against Notre Dame in week number 1. And in the whole entire game against OSU, Michigan laid an egg. And Michigan didn't beat anybody good this season. Michigan State was down. Penn State was down to a degree. Wisconsin was down. So beating those teams doesn't mean as much as maybe it would have in previous years, because all those teams that you beat were down. Were not great, strong teams this season. So Harbaugh and Michigan didn't beat a great team this year. So Harbaugh still looks like the coach that can't win the big game, and you're paying him all this money to be great and to win the big games, to beat Notre Dame in week 1, and to most notably beat Ohio State in the game.
So where do they go from here? Are you happy with Michigan being a 10-2 team, maybe 11-1, but when the big moment and the lights are the brightest, you shit the bed? Are you okay with that?
Well, no, because I am a Michigan fan to some degree. So once again, I was despondent myself. For a hardcore Michigan fan to go through that, I had a buddy that went to Ohio State to the Horseshoe for that game.
Oh.
He must have been getting ridiculed, and he probably was crying after the game because that was so horrible to endure and to take in. It must have been so horrible for that guy. For anybody there as a Michigan fan in the Horseshoe last Saturday.
What are the rational Michigan fans saying? Are you just kind of going, okay, you know what? We can't do this whole leaders and best nonsense. We can't do this. Who's got it better than us? We got to really change the approach offensively. We really got to make some changes and really take a serious look at how Michigan can get to the level of an Alabama. If not,
or an Ohio State, get to the level of an Ohio State. You're not even on the level of Ohio State, who I think is elite, but still a notch below Alabama. But yeah, you're not even at Ohio State's level after 4 years for Harbaugh at Michigan. People expected, I think, by year number 4 that Michigan once again would be at the same level as Ohio State, at least. Maybe not Alabama. Alabama's at a different level, the most elite program almost in NCAA or in D1 football history, FBS history. So you really can't compare yourself to Alabama. But you do compare yourself to Ohio State, and you're supposed to, and you're not at their level yet.
Are you confident maybe if Shea Patterson returns, a lot of the big games next year are in Ann Arbor? Are you maybe looking to next year, year 5, as the serious year to evaluate, because a lot of the games are at home?
See, I don't want to just hear that, oh, we're at home, so we're going to win now. You got to win those games on the road, too, so I don't like hearing that, and I'm not going to even consider that as being this great advantageous aspect for Michigan a year from now. In terms of playing Michigan State at home, playing Ohio State at home. I still don't think Michigan gets it done against Ohio State next year, even though you're in Ann Arbor for that game at the Big House, because Michigan's still not that level of a program that can beat Ohio State. You know, Michigan's still going to get outclassed, outcoached by Urban Meyer. As long as Urban Meyer is there, I think he can outcoach you. So unless your talent is so much better, well, and this program improves, not just about the talent. Forget the talent, throw that out the door. Because like I said before, Michigan athlete per athlete, I think, was about at the level of Ohio State this season. But Michigan got outcoached. And because the coaching staff, most notably Harbaugh and Don Brown, are stubborn, they have to look at themselves in the mirror and really consider changing their ways. And if they don't change their ways, man, Harbaugh might be 0-8 before he beats Ohio State. If he's still in Michigan, coaching the Michigan Wolverines, he might be 0-8 before he beats Urban Meyer and Ohio State. As long as Meyer stays there. Unless Michigan changes its ways, and it starts at the top with Harbaugh. Unless Harbaugh changes his ways, Michigan, I don't see Michigan beating Ohio State on a consistent basis. And I don't see Michigan beating Urban Meyer and company next season. I see Michigan being 0-5 against Ohio State after 5 years of Harbaugh being at Michigan. Unless Harbaugh changes his ways drastically, I think that is almost inevitable. You could say that Michigan becomes 0-5 after next season against Ohio State head-to-head. And that's not a good thing for Michigan. The Michigan faithful and the hardcore fans, especially out there, that expected Harbaugh would be contending for a national title by year number 4. And guess what? He should have been this season. They should be a team that was making the Final Four this season, and it's not going to be the case at this point.
Wah, wah, wah. Sorry, Michigan fans. Just wasn't your year. Oh, man.
Again, you love that. You were just... You were loving life, man, on Saturday. You were letting all the Michigan faithful hear about it.
Oh, man.
Tweeting the crap, tweeting everything from your phone, I know, and you were loving life, man.
62 problems, but Michigan ain't one, man.
I love how you keep using that 62. You got 62 is your favorite number, right? You kept using that. 62, 62 all day, all weekend long.
Vito, some people really don't know the purpose of having a sports Twitter page or a podcast. The purpose, when people say, oh, you're just hot takes, I asked a question. It probably was out of line, when you really look at it. I asked, should the Michigan Wolverines fire Don Brown? But
see, I don't think it's out of line.
It's not.
But it's like hyperbole. It's not going to happen.
It's not going to happen.
So,
but the reason is, and when you ask questions, and to go inside a little bit, you have to ask questions sometimes that are a little bit controversial, that are sometimes ridiculous in order to promote engagement. And guess what, Vito? Of the 70 responses that we got or so, of the many people that saw it, it was 50-50. Half the people
said... it shouldn't be. So those are people that are overreacting. So you know what? There's other people overreacting, so you have the right to pose that question.
62 points, not knowing the crossing routes are coming.
I called it. They're not going to fire Don Brown.
Vito, you
That's not the solution, I think.
Vito, you sat
as bad
here,
as it looked.
You sat here in a recording of Doc and Jock, and we had a super fan on that wanted to call and talk about Michigan. And I said, wait a minute, Adam's sitting there going, I'm confident, it's all good in the hood.
He wasn't even worried. Wasn't he saying that? I told him, I did say, though, you should be worried at least. Yes. It is Ohio State still.
And I said, aren't you worried a little bit about the crossing routes? Aren't you a little bit worried about Haskins? If you just read one article about, if you typed in Michigan, Ohio State preview, I just didn't know what was going on. I read what was happening. And so I said, okay, it's probably going to be competitive. There's going to be some things that are on film that Ohio State could exploit. Don Brown should have known that the crossing routes were coming. He didn't know. He refused to change it up from man-to-man, and none of his blitzes got there, which was shocking. So I don't know if his scheme is a gimmick or if he's really the man for the job, but it's going to be something to see what he does in bigger games going forward, because that scheme that he put up versus Ohio State wasn't good enough.
Yeah, Michigan has to make schematical changes going into 2019. Big time. I agree with that, but Don Brown's not going anywhere. Harbaugh's not going anywhere. Yeah. Now, I don't like their performances from the game against Ohio State. And this season, Don Brown has been stubborn throughout his defensive coordinator career. He has been stubborn. He definitely has. I just hope he adjusts his ways. Now, if he doesn't next year, and they get, what if they get beat down against Ohio State at home next year and allow 40, 50 points? You would be loving life, man. But how sad would that be for Michigan, man?
I might be there.
You might be there with me witnessing that route by Ohio State at the big house. But if that happens, then you start thinking, and then I think you really do have to consider firing Don Brown. And that's when I could see it happening. But Harbaugh still, man, if he wins 10 games a year, guess what? Harbaugh's not going anywhere. He would have to start winning 7 to 8 games a year, and then I think Michigan would consider firing him.
All right, Vito, we're going to do one more topic after the break. Again, want to thank the great sponsors that make this broadcast possible, Top Cat Sales and the Legacy Football Organization. One topic, I know we got a lot, and we'll spread it out in the coming broadcast that we do. What's the topic that you want to get into second half of the podcast?
Well, how about expanding the college football playoff and scrapping the conference championship games? I think that would be great to do as well for college football as a whole, because Dan Wetzel of Yahoo Sports just came out with this article. Great article to read. Very intriguing as well, concept behind what he has in mind for kind of restoring college football to glory and making it better, bigger and better for the college football playoff moving forward.
And I totally disagree. We'll have a fun debate right after this quick timeout.
Should be very fun. And guess what? We have to give some props to our sponsor, newest sponsor in Legacy Football. Put on a great senior all-star game this past weekend at the beautiful Legacy Center in Brighton. And the Legacy Football Organization, Doc, was founded in 2009. It is a premier off-season development program in the state of Michigan, in the Midwest, and the entire country. It provides unique platforms for student athletes on and off the football field through community service, social awareness, education, and football. And its staff consists of many notable former collegiate stars and NFL players, such as a former guest on these very airwaves, and former Michigan State All-American linebacker Greg Jones, a man that also won a Super Bowl as a rookie, of all things, with the New York Giants in 2011. And, Doc, to find out more about the Legacy Football Organization, please contact National Director of Football Operations, Justin Sassante, or go online at www.legacyfootballorg.com. And to another sponsor of this fine edition of Two Bad Hombres in Top Cat Sales. And, Doc, and to all of you out there, if you are looking for apparel for your team, for your business, for your club, for whatever it may be, for your corporation, then look no further than Top Cat Sales. Through founder and owner John Wangler's leadership, Top Cat has developed a tradition of selling and distributing apparel with the very highest quality and the very best service, with brands such as Adidas. So get your team or your corporation, your small business or club all in with Top Cat today by calling 248-246-1054. Once again, the phone number for Top Cat Sales is 248-246-1054. And remember to follow Top Cat Sales on Twitter at Team Top Cat.
Welcome back to this edition of Two Bad Hombres. I just want to say, Vito, I had a great time out there at the Legacy Football Organization, the Legacy Center out there in Brighton. The game was awesome. Fox Sports Detroit was awesome. You and I had a good time going out there, and I think you learned a lot from me in that experience in terms of covering sports and kind of getting the good shot. And
getting in the good shot, being on TV, making sure your face is showing on TV, because you and I both did that.
What are you talking about?
Wait. Oh, that wasn't us. No, we didn't do that. No, that wouldn't be us. Not you, at least. Come on.
Oh, man.
Not you by any stretch of the imagination.
It was great. We were all over Fox Sports Detroit. And what did your parents think of when you showed when you showed them some of the videos of what we were doing out there?
They were laughing, man. They were laughing up a storm because they were like, John, really? John? They were thinking, John is something else. You're a character. We're both characters. We want to get on TV. We showed our faces to the masses a little bit, and we got on FSD through the broadcast that they did of the Legacy Football All-Star Game last Sunday at the Legacy Center. And we have some great shots that were taken of us, including from Ken Detloff, the photographer that you met that I've known now for a couple of years, covers all these high school sporting events. And I met him a couple of years ago at a football game, and you know, since then we've developed this great relationship, great rapport, and we're always cracking jokes with each other. And he took a couple of shots of you and I as well that we've posted on Instagram since, on the Detroit Sports Podcast Instagram page, on my personal Instagram page. So go to Vito Jerome on Instagram. You can see that photo of you and I laughing up a storm. I was checking out your phone. You were scrolling through something. And then there was a caption from Chris Wynn, I think, on Twitter, a follower of our network, that said he's just scrolling through like Bumble and saw a hot chick. And I was laughing at that. That was a very good caption.
It was a fun time. Justin Sassante, man, put on a decent performance, and it was outstanding to be part of it. Well organized, the work out there by Legacy to put something together like that. That's why I love talking to individuals like Justin, in that to learn how you put something together, something like that is just awesome. So it's good stuff.
It was a great event, great exposure for us, for Legacy football specifically, and most notably.
Another event covered by the Detroit Sports Podcast Network in a great manner. And yeah, it was fun to be part of the camera and the scene.
You loved getting that camera time, man. You were all about getting that camera time.
My wife was laughing at the halftime stuff and things like that, but when Brooke Fletcher interviewed the lineman, and I'm just only a human there standing, she was like, "What are you doing?" It looked ridiculous, and it was funny. So
hey, Doc, we'll just leave it at this. Doc would do anything to get on TV. Okay, and he definitely did so at that Legacy Football All-Star Game too last Sunday at the beautiful Legacy Center.
You got to draw attention any way you can, and whoever saw it. It was a good time. Justin Sassante and the crew did a great job. The trainers,
definitely.
And the more we go out, the more people are looking at this whole broadcast thing and podcasting, going, "Oh, let me talk to you guys because you guys seem to know what you're doing." So all in all, it was a great time, and we look forward to our continued relationship with a great sponsor like the Legacy Football Organization. Now, Vito, people want to fix the college football playoff. I like it as is.
Okay, so why is that?
It makes each regular season game have such importance that a loss is almost devastating. Each game in the regular season is like a playoff, okay? You're going to have quality 4 teams. You're hanging in on every single game at the beginning of the year and at the end of the year. If you go to 8 teams, it's fine. You introduce more storylines for the underdogs, and
the UCFs, right?
Yeah, exactly. But and you might have some stories where UCF maybe one day would defeat a Michigan when they're the number 1 seed. But it's something where I go right now. It means something. It's supremely important to win a bunch of games and to have a good season and to get to the conference final and win it. It was so awesome when Michigan State did it. If it was 8 team, I don't think it would have meant as much. When Michigan State got there, it was so awesome because they had to fight a grueling game versus Iowa in the Big Ten title game in Indy, and they had to have an unbelievable drive where they just ran the ball, pounded it, and they eventually had a great drive and won the game and went to the college football playoff. It means something. And look, right now, these athletes are playing 12 games. You have another game added to the mix if you have 8 teams. I don't like the concept. I mean, I don't want to reward teams with 2 and 3 losses, and then you could potentially go from 8 to 16 and things like that. Look, the way it is right now, where you have meaningful bowl games and you have the 2 important bowl games with the college football playoff implications, are just fine. I like it the way it is, and I'll hear your argument, but I don't see myself swaying a whole heck of a lot in regards to changing it. It means something. Notre Dame, thrilled to have been part of it. Michigan State now, thrilled to have been part of it. Alabama's a staple. Clemson. It's the elite of the elite make it. The Final 4 should mean something. Don't expand it to 8, because then, look, the loss that Michigan suffered to Ohio State might not mean as much.
Well, yeah, Michigan could still get in, which you don't want to see happen because you're a Sparty fan, but also because realistically, college football as a whole, you don't think would benefit from Michigan being in because Michigan, you think, doesn't deserve it because of how bad they lost to Ohio State in that game, right?
Exactly.
I've got you. So Dan Wetzel said from Yahoo Sports that his way...
What's his argument? Yep.
So his way of reformatting the college football playoff is by expanding it to 8 teams, scrapping the conference championship games in the process too. And it would use 5 automatic bids for the major conferences, the Power 5 conferences, 3 at-large bids, and then home sites for the first round. So the better seed gets a home game in the first round. Then after that, it would be at a neutral site for the semifinal games. So if you do go with 8, well, yeah, you have more weeks to the season, more games for the kids to play when they're, supposedly or should be studying, right? Should be at home, should be in their dorm room studying and focusing on their academics too, which makes it hard when they're playing additional games. But if you scrap the conference championship game, guess what? That's a game right there that you want to play in anyways. So really, there are 12 regular season games. We all know that for every single team out there. But you want the chance to play that 13th game anyways, your conference championship game, and then your 14th game is your bowl game. So really, you could have where it's only 2 additional weeks. You could make it that way too. Now, it is just that right now, and I get that. So you would be adding the 1 additional week, but I think it's worth the while of college football to do so, because then you would get the likes of UCF in there, and then guess what? They would get their chance to shine. Then if they're not good enough, if they are a fraud, they get shown to be a fraud. They get blown out, or they just lose that game, but they got their shot then to shine and to get it done on the national stage in front of a national audience. And I would like to see UCF get that shot. And then how about Notre Dame that doesn't play in a conference championship game? Now, I know that's the school's fault. They don't want to be in a conference, but, well, guess what? They're not playing in a conference championship game already. Just give them an additional game. Then this additional game would be, well, as part of the college football playoff, if they're deserving of being in the college football playoff, as is the case this season, where they are deserving, and they don't play in a conference championship game as it is, so why not just give them an additional game? It's not going to hurt them being an additional game. So I don't mind the additional game for a couple of reasons, and I think this is inevitable. I think eventually they will expand to at least 6, if not 8, and I could see them going to as many as 8 teams eventually down the line. So not in the near future, as in the next 3 years. I could see maybe it being expanded to 6 in the next 3, but I would say 10 years from now, in 2028, I think we will be seeing an 8-team college football playoff format.
Okay, Vito, it wasn't that convincing.
No, I didn't really use an argument that was very convincing.
No.
Because 4 is fine. you could say it's fine at least because you have 2 rounds. I think you do not want to go down the route of the BCS where you have the BCS National Championship game where just the top 2 teams make it. I don't want to see that where the top 2 seeded teams just make the National Championship game right off the bat. But I think more teams are deserving. And you could even go with 6 where the top 2 seeds have a bye. I kind of like that idea as well. And that's why I think going to 6 is inevitable. So let's say kind of forget Dan Wetzel's formula for reformatting, reshaping the college football playoff.
Okay,
let's just say 6.
5
so 2
power
teams get a bye.
conferences. The 5, if you go to 6, the 5
Power 5 conferences get in automatically.
Yep. The 5 winners of the Power 5 conferences get in. So you have to win.
Yes, and I would like that. That has to happen. I think Power 5 conferences get in automatically.
One outlier bid or one.
So that's fine with you. 1 at large. It's
one at large bid.
At large.
That
Instead
would
of
be great.
3, because with 8 it's 3 at larges,
Yep.
which I wouldn't
1.
mind either. But I think it's inevitable. It goes to 6.
Okay, I could live with that as a compromise.
And then how about the 2 bye? 2 teams get a bye. The top 2 seeds get a bye in that first round.
Exactly.
What do you think of that?
That would be great.
That would make sense where the first 2 teams, top 2 seeded teams, still kind of
get rewarded for
benefit from being the top 2 teams in the college football playoff. And that makes sense because they should benefit from being the top 2 teams in the playoff.
And I think because so much money will be involved that we're probably looking at expansion in the coming years. But to recap.
But see, really, the conference championship games have become meaningless. Think about it.
Yeah.
That's why Dan Wetzel also brought up scrapping the conference title games. Now, what do you think of that idea, at least? How about at least scrapping the conference title games? Because look at this. Ohio State against Northwestern. Who really wants to watch that? Everybody thinks Ohio State's going to rout Northwestern. And it would be so surprising if Northwestern pulled off the upset, which I don't see happening whatsoever. I could see Ohio State having the game in their possession by halftime.
I know that people want to get rid of it, but it also has meaning, and especially with the Big Ten, you got 14 teams. It's just a situation in which it helps out where you play a regular season, you get to the top of your division, and then you play it out. And I think that's fair. I like the way it's been shaken out, the SEC, the Big Ten, and I think the one thing that you could change is maybe force Notre Dame into a conference. Just force them into a conference so that they just don't have a road, an easier road than everybody else.
Because if you get rid of the conference championship game, it's kind of what I was saying before. I didn't really get to it or make the point eloquently and greatly. But if you get rid of that, Notre Dame, you don't have to worry about them not being in a conference championship game. So you get rid of the conference title game, and you had to level the playing field for Notre Dame, those teams that are independent teams, which there's only, BYU and Notre Dame right now, so not many of them, but still makes it more fair for Notre Dame. And then Notre Dame still has to play the additional game as part of the first round, let's say, of the college football playoff. And they're not one of those top 2 seeds that get that automatic bye in the first round for being the top 2 seeds.
So you think the next expansion will be to 6 games?
I think that's inevitable. I think it does occur for sure within the next 3-4 years. To 8 teams, maybe 10 years down the line, I could see it happening by 2028. But I don't see we're going to see 8 teams in the college football playoff by 2021. I'll say that much.
Great recording, Vito. This podcast is coming to an end. I enjoyed thoroughly talking about Matthew Stafford, Michigan's epic loss to Ohio State, and looking at college football. Two Bad Hombres airs every single Saturday. You can find this podcast on the Detroit Sports Podcast Network. Anywhere you find podcasts, you can find the Detroit Sports Podcast Network. Go rate and review. Go find us on iTunes, Podomatic, Stitcher, Podbay, our website. It streams, DetroitSportsPodcast.com. We greatly appreciate all the monthly support, the great sponsors, and all the engagement on our Twitter pages. Follow Vito Valeni-Churko at Vito Jerome. Follow the network and message anytime at Detroit Podcast.
Really quick, scrap the conference championship games, because if you care about a great product, putting out a great product, college football should. And if you care about making money, you can do both, just like we do at the podcast network. We care about putting out a great product and making money. And we do just that. And college football can follow our footsteps then, right?
See everybody next week. You've just downloaded Two Bad Hombres.
Adios.